Hello and welcome to Castle for One Games. I am George Castle. Today I'll be providing an Automa tutorial for Asian Tiger, A Story of Prosperity. And although this is not a playthrough video, I will be playing against the bot and recording certain moments of the playthrough that I feel are important to help with the rules of the solo mode. So you may see some similar pieces being moved around in different segments of the video, but that's just more for effect, or perhaps I just forgot to move something back. But the main focus is going to be on the rules of the Automa. I'm also trying something new. I'm adding a gray color screenshot for moments of hypothetical examples or corrections. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd appreciate your feedback. And with that out of the way, let's rock. All right, we're going to go through the setup for the bot, for the player, and for the main board. So let's turn our attention first to these prosperity tokens. We have 4 of them. So let's go ahead and pick these up and get ready for setup out onto the board. Now notice that I'm using this side of the prosperity token, which has only 2 dots on the bottom right corner, as opposed to these tiles that have 3 or 4, since these are for when you play 3 or 4 players. And we're going to place all 4 of these randomly on the corner of each region. So let's say I start in this order: South Korea, and then Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. This could vary depending on where you want to start. So then we're going to shake these up, pick one out, and I'm going to be placing it in South Korea. So now we're going to grab 3 of the workers and then randomly placing them on each region, depending on the highest value for each of the prosperity tokens. And I'll start with the highest value first and work my way down. In this case, I'll start with this one in Singapore with 22 points. So we're going to place the first one randomly on the column A of Singapore. The next value is 20, so Hong Kong. We're going to place this worker on column B. And the third highest number, which will be this one with 18 points, we're going to place that worker on column C here in South Korea. And because Taiwan has the lowest valued prosperity point, it will not start with any workers on any of the columns. Now we have 9 workers for each color. So we're going to grab the first 3, 1 for each color, and these will be our starting workers on the board. And what you do is you shake it up and randomly select one, and this worker will be placed in the first column, column A for Singapore. And again, it's because it has the highest valued prosperity tile with 22. And now we're going to place the next worker in Hong Kong. So we're going to randomly select a worker for column B. And here we go. We have selected the gray colored worker. And finally, we're going to move on to South Korea and place this last worker in column C. All right, you see these 6 bonus tiles. They have this gift icon in the back. So let's go ahead and collect all of these. And then we're going to mix them up and put one out randomly. So we're going to start with South Korea. So it'll go here. This next one is going to go on here in Taiwan. This one will go in Hong Kong. And finally, this one's going to go to Singapore. And that's going to leave us with these 2 bonus tiles here. And these will go on the side of the board. And of course, you can get access to these 2 if you ever gain this yen bonus tile, which allows you to collect the bonuses from these tiles. As a quick reminder, we are using the 2-player side of the board, and the turn order is always going to go to the player first and then the bot. And if you notice on the global track, because I am the first player, I'm going to start on space 1. And because the bot is in second turn order, it will start in space 2. And when we talk about setting up the flags, again, because this is a 2-player game, we're going to have 2 sets of flags, one with a 3 and the other with a 6 value. You only need to set up 2 flags per space, including here. In the lower section, we're going to have 2 flags. And I know it's a little bit off screen, but don't forget to add the 4 special flags, which are only rewarded at the end of the first era. Now, as far as these workers go, we're going to divide these up into 2 groups of 4 for each color. So these 4 are going to be for the player, and these 3 groups of 4 are going to be for the bot. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and place all of our workers on this cool, nifty bag. So let's shake this up, and we're going to pull 2 workers. But remember, they must be different color. And we're going to place them on the top here. So these 2 are not going to be used for Era 1. And now let's go ahead and start removing each of the 10 workers from the bag and place them on the top of our board. And we're going to place the factories on each of these spaces. And the rest of the generic infrastructure buildings will be covering the rest of the spaces on the Automa board. Make sure you've separated the 10 tiles representing each worker's action, and we're going to be shuffling these up. And then we're going to place them next to its board. And as for our setup, don't forget that we get the 3 starting energy, the 2 science lab coats, and then I like to separate 4 of the different goods, which are always going to be the chemicals, finance, machinery, and electronics. So then all we need to do is just shuffle these up. Then we're going to pick one out, which is going to be the one we're going to start with. And in this case, it'll be the electronics. And the rest go back in the general supply. And that's the setup for the players. So as mentioned, the player goes first, and then the bot. And then we alternate turns throughout the first era, until we find out who will be first in the next era. And once my turn is complete, we're going to turn our attention to the bot. And during the bot's turn, we will flip one of these action tiles, once per turn. Now I'll go ahead and do my turn first, just this once to give you a good feel of what it's like when you first start the game. So I'll place out my first worker, and I'll place it on Hong Kong, on the first column, which is going to cost me 3 investment funds. And now I get to choose to build anything on this column, or anything back. And I'm going to take this generic infrastructure, and since I'm going to want to place a factory here later to get this chemistry good, I'll place my building here. That way I can get a discount later on. And that's going to gain me 3 energy. Now we're going to move on to the bot's first turn. Let's go ahead and flip the bot's first tile. And the first thing I like to look at is the top symbol. This helps me know where I'm going to place the bot's next worker. And this tiger happens to be in Taiwan. So let's go ahead and take its first worker. And since all of these columns are empty, the Automa always places it on the first available column to the left. So it'll go here on column A. And the next thing I like to focus on is the symbol right underneath it. And because it's Era 1, we're going to take a look at the symbol on the left side of the tile. Now, typically, when you see this symbol, it represents a human player. And in this case, you would advance 3 spaces for the player. But for the bot, it has this little computer symbol indicating that we need to perform an action for the Automa. And in this case, it's to advance 2 spaces up the region's influence track. So now we advance on the influence track 2 spaces. And now we follow the bot's priority. It will want to build a factory first. Where am I going to build the factory? It's always going to try and build where it placed its worker. In this case, it's on column A. And notice the symbol, which is a machinery. It means that the bot must have a machinery factory available on its board. So which one's the machinery? It's the one right here. So we're going to take this one that matches and place it right here. So now it's blocked this space for the remainder of the game. And if I now want to build the machinery factory, I'm going to have to build in South Korea. And now that we've completed the action tile, the Automa's turn is over. All right, in this next scenario, we flipped over the action tile, which indicates that the Automa wants to build in either Hong Kong or Singapore. And it would prefer the tiger that has its most investment points. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these two. Now, because it wants the most, there's nothing here and there's nothing here. So the tiebreaker is going to be this tiger at the bottom left half for arrow 1, which is Hong Kong. So we're going to go ahead and place it here. Let's take the next worker. In this case, it's gray. And the only place I can place it on is this column here, where there's another gray worker. We'll go ahead and place it right next to this gray worker. And because it's arrow 1, it's going to place a good that matches where we placed its worker. In this case, it'll be a machinery. All right, so we're going to go ahead and grab one from the supply. And we're going to place it here. And that's going to block it for the remainder of this first arrow. Now, if there's already one here, we would just skip it. So going down its priority, it's going to want to build a power plant on the same column where it placed its worker. So it'll be this energy sector here. Now, which one of these generic infrastructures is it going to select? Well, if you notice, there's numbers underneath them. We're going to be going in chronological order, starting with number 1. So the first one will be this one right here. And again, it's going to go in the same column where it placed its worker. So it's going to go right there. And again, it doesn't gain anything. It's just there to block you. So we were able to perform its first action on the priority list. And now it has completed its turn. All right, we move forward to the next scenario. In this case, we flip over the tile. And it wants to place a worker at the trade center. Let's go ahead and take its next worker. All right, so we're still in arrow 1, and that means that the bot's priority of placement is going to start from the topmost available spot and work its way down to the bottom. This is the top, middle, and lower section. So we'll go ahead and place this one at the very top. Next, it wants to collect 2 flags that it doesn't already have on its personal board. And currently, it doesn't have any flags. So again, it wants at least 2 flags that it doesn't have. We're going to go ahead and follow the priority white arrow that's in the middle here in this tile to know which flag it's going to want to take first. So we're going to start from the top and work our way down. It's always going to want the highest value for the tiebreaker. But since they're all the same, it's going to take the first 2. Now we have the 2 that it wanted, and it doesn't take 12 free steps up the global track. It just takes 6 from one of the 2, just like a human player. And now they're currently at 2, so now they get to move up 6 spaces to 8. So all we have to do is just match the flag to their space on the board, and the second one goes here. And then once it reaches the last spot, it's going to trigger this bonus. So we went ahead and placed its worker. We collected 2 flags that it didn't have, and because of the flag it collected, it was able to move up 6 spaces on the track. And now that we've completed all of the steps, this completes the bot's turn. Now, let's say that instead we had one with a lower value. Again, the priority is going to be the flag that has the highest value. So in this case, it would be these 2. Now, here's another scenario. It wants 2 different flags. Unfortunately, there's no flags left. So it's going to place it down here. And of these 2 options, it's always going to pick this one, which is to move up 2 spaces on the globe track. 1, 2. And that's what this symbol means. If there's no flags, just place it in the special trade center and move up 2 spaces. All right, here's another scenario. This time the bot wants to place a worker in either Hong Kong or Singapore, wherever it has the least investment points. This one has 2 of them, and this one has 1. So it's going to place its worker in Singapore. And because it's a black worker, it will go on column A. And first it looks like it's going to want to place out a science lab. And because it placed its worker on this column, it will try here. However, since it's occupied, it will try in column B. And since it's occupied there, it will try for column C. This is going to be this one right here. And now it's blocked my satellite from accumulating more points. And by the way, when it's empty on this tile, it doesn't take that particular action. I forgot to mention that. So that was the bot's last action of era 1. So let's move on to the next era, which is considered the management phase. Now that it's the end of era 1, we're going to move on to the first management phase. And so let's start with the turn order. It's check to see who's first on the global track. Now we're tied. However, because the bot's marker came after mine, it is technically on top of mine, and whoever is on the bottom breaks the tie. So I retain turn order this time. So instead of swapping our markers, I get to stay in first turn order. And now let's move on to the next step here, and we count the influence points to then distribute the special flags. Whoever has the most investment points will advance 12 spaces up the influence track, and the most advanced will gain a special flag. And I like to go by the order of the highest priority points from each tile. Singapore has 22, so we'll start there. Then we're going to move on to Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taiwan. So basically we're going to be going clockwise order. So now we're going to go ahead and count all of the wooden pieces in this area. And we're going to start with mine first, which I am the yellow player. So currently I have 1, 2, this counts as 3. And thanks to this satellite, I get to count these 2 again. So 4, 5. And for the bot has 1, 2. So currently I have the most investment points. So since I'm in first place, I get the 12 points. And the bot came in second, so it will get 9. And advance up the influence track in Singapore. So again, since I'm in first place, I'm going to take my marker all the way to 12. And because the bot got second place, we add just 9 to the bot's already 3 points. So now we are tied at 12 influence points. And actually, let me place it here so you can see that I'm at the bottom. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to Hong Kong. And again, for me, I have 1, 2. And for my opponent, it also has 2. So we are tied. And when we're tied, we check to see if there's any headquarters built. In this case, we don't have one. And remember, this is what the headquarters look like. Next, we check to see who has the most pieces in each of the columns. We'll start with column A. In this case, I have the most, so I break the tie. We don't have to move on to column B or C. If we would have had the same number of pieces, then we would have gone to column B. And if still tied, we would have gone to column C. And if still tied, we would have checked for turn order. But in this case, I have 1. So I'm going to go ahead and get the 12 points up the influence track. And the bot gets 9. So it's going to also tie me in Hong Kong. All right, now we move on to South Korea. And as you can see, we are tied with 2 apiece. And again, we don't have any headquarters to break the tie. So the next thing we're going to do is go straight to the columns to see who has the most pieces in column A. And in this case, the bot has 1 piece here. So now the bot is going to get the 12 points. And that will take it to 15. And I get 9 points for being second place. So I go to 12. And lastly, we're going to go to Taiwan. And again, we are tied. Both of us has 2. And there's no headquarters for the tiebreaker. So now we're going to go ahead and break the tie with the bot beating me in column A. So now it gets 12 points, which will bump it up to 15. And then I get 9. So I ended up with 12. And now we're going to go ahead and distribute the special flags. Unfortunately, we are obligated to do so. We have to take the flags. And these are the special flags we're going to get. And since there's 4 of them, we're going to give one out to whoever is first in each of the 4 tigers. So again, I'll start with Singapore. And here we are tied. And what happens when we're tied? Well, when we're trying to reward the flags, it works a little bit differently. Again, we check to see if there's a headquarters. And for this type of tiebreaker, we don't worry about the columns. That was just used to determine the influence points. So for tiebreakers, we just worry about going straight to the turn order. And in this case, I'm leading in turn order, so I will break the tie. And so now I gain one of the special flags. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter which one. And notice that the special flags don't have any of the shape symbols on the left corner like some of the other ones have. And I can place it next to any of these spaces that has the black flag. I can even place it on this space here because this one covers the last row. And this one with the square covers the top row. So this middle row is still available. I can place a diamond flag or a special flag. So if I want to, I can place it here. And now normally, I can choose a reward that comes with a flag. In this case, it would allow me to remove one of my generic infrastructures from anywhere on my board. However, special flags don't reward any of these special bonuses. So in this case, I'm just going to be using it for the star. So now I can get 5 points for every 5 different infrastructures I have built in one region. So if I built 5 different infrastructures in 2 regions, I could essentially get 10 points. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to Hong Kong. We're also tied here with 12. So again, we're going to need a tiebreaker. We don't have a headquarter, so the only other tiebreaker is turn order. So again, I'm leading in turn order, so I'm going to get the other flag. So this one's mine. I've met the maximum here, so I won't be able to place any more flags in this space. So I'll just choose to place it here. Again, I don't gain any of the bonuses, but at least I have 1 flag for scoring. Next is South Korea. Unfortunately, the bot is beating me here, so it will get a flag. It's also beating me in Taiwan, so it's also going to get another flag. So now we're going to go ahead and reward both flags, and both of these flags will go on the top right-hand corner. And even though it doesn't complete that column with these flags, it will have an additional 2 stars to score with. So it's still going to need the other 2 different flags to trigger this bonus. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the last phase of this era, and this part is just for the player, not for the bot. And basically, we just gain an additional investment fund for every laboratory I've built. So first off, we're going to go ahead and reset all of these to spot 6. Except for Singapore. I do have 2 laboratories built, so it's going to go to spot 8. All right, and now we're back to the beginning for Era 2. Don't forget that all the workers are going to be reset, just like we did at the beginning of the game during setup. All right, and then make sure to clear out any goods. We have one here, and this one over here in South Korea. So both of these will go back in the supply. All right, now we're in Era 2, and we've set up 3 randomly selected workers for each of the columns, depending on the priority value. Again, as mentioned during setup. We then need to shuffle the bot's action tile. We'll go ahead and set them aside here. And again, I go first in turn order. All right, so for the bot's first turn of the second era, we're going to go ahead and flip this one over. And it wants to go to an investment center. So we'll go ahead and take the next worker over. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take it to Taiwan. And we're going to place it on the furthest one to the left. So it's going to go to column B. And now because we are in Era 2, it's going to use this symbol, which means we're going to sell a good to this column. And the one it's going to place is a finance good. All right, and for its first priority, it's going to build on a university. It will first look for the space that's available on the column that it's placed its worker. So as you can see, this space is empty. So we're going to go ahead and move it to the next section. And the next generic infrastructure will be from space number 5. And in this case, it will be 2 of them. So it will also take from space 6, which is the next one over. And again, we're going to place the first one on the University of column B, always the one furthest to the left. And then we'll place the next one on a department. Now, typically, we get to choose any of these. However, the bot will always choose the leftmost available space. In this case, it will take the bonus, which advances 4 spaces up the global track. So from 14, it'll go to 18. And now that it's cleared this section, it's going to take advantage of this bonus. And this bonus says that it wants to build a parts factory, and it's going to want it on the region that has the least amount of investment points. And we have a 3-way tie between Singapore, Hong Kong, and South Korea. They all have 2. In that case, the tiebreaker indicates that it wants the region where I have the most investment points. In Hong Kong, I have 2. In South Korea, I also have 2. But in Singapore, I have 5. So we'll go ahead and place the parts factory under this factory. Now let's go into a hypothetical. Let's say that the satellite wasn't here. Now we have a three-way tie. It still wants the region where I have the most influence, but we are tied in all three regions. So the next tiebreaker would be in a region where I have the most investment funds. Well, I have a 6 in each of the three regions. Then in that case, the last tiebreaker is that I get to choose. So let's say I chose here. But going back to our original scenario, that was not the case. So we'll go ahead and place it back to where it was. All right, that is the end of the bot's turn. All right, and for our next scenario, we're going to go ahead and flip the next one over. And this time, it wants to place a worker between two different regions. Let's go ahead and take the next worker. All right, and so again, it's going to want to place a worker on a region that has the most of its own investment points. And this will be between South Korea and Taiwan. South Korea only has 2, but in Taiwan it has 4. So we'll place one in Taiwan. And it's going to go on column C, where the other gray worker is. And because we are in the second era, it will follow this side of the tile, which is to move 4 spaces up the influence track. So we're going to move it from 15 to 19. And next up on the priority is to build a factory on that column. However, there's already one of my factories there. So we'll move on to the next action in its priority, and it wants to build a power plant. However, there's already one of my power plants there. So let's move on to the next one, and that's to build a university. There's only departments in that column. There's no universities. So we're going to have to move it to the last option, and that's to place a laboratory. However, I've already built a laboratory there. So the only option that the bot has is to place the laboratory to the right, which is the infinity symbol, which means you can have as many different laboratories as we want. So let's go ahead and remove the next one in chronological order. So that's going to be the number 7. And then we'll place it on laboratory space. Now keep in mind that when we are counting influence points, neither spaces will be counted for satellites. But more about that towards the end of the video. All right, that completes the bot's actions. All right, we fast forwarded the game. Let's flip over to the next one. And this time it wants to place a worker in the trade center. So let's go ahead and take its next worker. And now, since it's era 2, we're actually going to go ahead and start from the bottom and work our way up. Now this special trade center doesn't count. We actually start from this space up. And the first one available is in the regional trade center. And it wants 2 flags that it doesn't have. Now it doesn't have any of these 2, so we're going to go ahead and take both of them. And remember that it's going to take the flag that offers the most steps up the global track. In this case, it'll move up 4 spaces. So we're going to go ahead and move it from 26 to 30. So now we're going to go ahead and place both of these. One goes here, and the other one goes right underneath it. And now that that column is complete, it will now activate its bonus. And this bonus indicates that it will build its headquarters in a region that the bot has the least amount of investment points. So in Hong Kong, it only has 4. In South Korea, it only has 4. In Taiwan, it has 5. And remember, in Singapore, there is 3. And that's because there's a parts factory built as well. So I'll leave it on the side so it's better to see. So there's your 3. So we'll go ahead and place its headquarters in Singapore. All right, so now it has the advantage for the tiebreaker. All right, we've completed its turn. In our next scenario, we draw the next action tile, and this time it wants to place a worker in the trade center. So we're going to go ahead and take the next worker, and since it's the second era, we're going to go ahead and place it on the next available space. Remember, go from bottom to the top. Again, we don't count this one, but in this case, this is the only space that it can place that particular color of worker. Again, we are in era 2, so this time it will ask for up to 3 flags that it doesn't already have. It would take all 3 flags, however, the only one that it doesn't have is the Australian flag. So we will place it here. which now completes the column and will take the bonus. Now let's say that the bot had all 3 of them already. Well, in that case, it would just take 2 flags that it already had. Remember that it always prefers the highest value. However, since all the flags are the same value, we follow the white arrow for priority. And in this case, it'll be China and Japan. All right, now back to our original scenario. So now that it's completed this column, it will gain this bonus. And this one allows the bot to place a greenish colored satellite in a region that it has the most laboratories built. So we take the satellite from its supply. There's one in South Korea, and there's one in Singapore. However, the color that it wants is in Singapore, which has already been taken by one of my satellites. So instead, it will place it over here in South Korea. Now, let's say that my satellite wasn't in Singapore. Now we have 2 spaces to place its satellite. So how do we break the tie? It's going to want a region where I have the most investment points. And I have 3 in South Korea and 2 in Singapore. So of course, it would have ended up in South Korea after all. But what if one of my satellites was in South Korea as well? Because remember, I could have used the satellite from this section of my player board, which allows me to place it in any of the satellite spaces. Well, in that case, it would have just skipped that bonus. Or I suppose if you want to make it harder for yourself, you could place it in any other region, following the same criteria for tiebreakers. All right, but that's the end of the bot's turn. All right, this is another scenario with the same action tile for a trade center placement. And now let's go over here. So again, it goes from the bottom to the top. So it's going to go here. However, there are no flags in this regional trade center. In that case, we reference the bottom section of the tile. And notice that this says, if no flags, go to the special trade center. So we just move to this section instead. And of the 2 options, it always chooses the one to move up 2 spaces on the global track. All right, so we're now in the management phase of Era 2, and we're going to start with turn order. And this time, it says we're going to trade in 3 of our leftover resources to advance 1 space on the global track. So now I'm going to separate every 3 resources to see how many I get to advance. So let's see how many we get. So there's 3. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is just 1, so it's not enough. And these 2, well, they're just performance bonuses. They don't count as resources. So that means I get to advance only 5 spaces total. So I'm at 32, I get to move to 37. That means I get to retain first turn order, which is great for tiebreakers. And now we're going to go ahead and check for influence and award the players in each region 20 influence points for first and 14 for being second place. And after we're done moving up the influence tracks, instead of rewarding the special flags, this time we're going to be awarding the prosperity points. And we're going to start with Singapore and work our way around clockwise. So that means we're going to count our investment points. And remember, that's counting all of the wooden pieces we have built so far. And we're going to count mine first. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bot has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that means the bot wins. And it will earn the 20 influence points, bringing the bot's total to 32. And I will earn 14, bringing my total to 26. Since the bot has the majority of influence, we will award it 22 prosperity points, and I will get 14. And this time, we will count it on the scorecard. Now, I did want to mention that whenever we are counting for investment points for either the first or second era, well, let's say that the bot or the player had a laboratory and or a power plant on the spaces with the infinity symbol, and we had a satellite. Well, in this scenario, the red player would only count one laboratory because we do not count any infrastructures on those spaces for satellites. Same goes for the power plant. And when we count the factories for the satellites, we don't count the parts factory. All right, let's continue the Era 2 management phase. Next is Hong Kong, and we're going to start with mine. I have one for this factory. I also have a parts factory, so that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, the bot has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we are tied in Hong Kong for investment points, and we don't have any headquarters in this region to break the tie. So let's start with the columns to break the tie instead. I have the most in column A. I have 4, and the bot doesn't have anything, so I win the tiebreaker. So 20 points here will take me to 35. And the bot will go from 24 to 38 with the 14 points. So the bot ends up beating me in Hong Kong as well. So the bot will get 20, and I'll get 14 prosperity points. And now let's move on to South Korea. And for me, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for the bot, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I almost forgot. I have 6 thanks to this headquarter. So thankfully, I have that headquarter for the tiebreaker. So I'm going to get the 20 influence points, bringing me to 36. And the bot will get 14, bringing it to 29. So I win on the influence points. And I'm going to get the 18 prosperity points, and the bot will get 9. And finally, we're going to move on to Taiwan. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the bot has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, that means that the bot will get 20 and will end up in 39. And I'll get the 14, and I'm at 29. So the bot wins in Taiwan. And we'll gain the 12 prosperity points. And I'm only going to get the 2. And now we're going to move on to scoring the final bonuses for each of the 6 sectors on the right margin of our player board. So I don't have anything on the top sector, so let's move on to the next one. This one would have scored me 5 points thanks to the stars. Unfortunately, I don't have any regions with 5 different infrastructures, so I'm going to get 0 points. Now, this one is going to count the satellites that I have out on the board, and I have 4 stars as my multiplier. Since I have 2 satellites, that's going to give me a total of 8 points. The next one is going to give me 4 points for each of my parts factory. Unfortunately, I have 1, so that's 4 points for this sector. And finally, I get 1 point for every laboratory I built. I have 5 laboratories, so I have 5 points. And now we move on to the bot. And we're going to count all of its stars. And in this case, it has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. 14 times whichever difficulty level you choose. In this case, I chose the normal level, so that's 48 points. And now we move on to the last one. And this one is saying that we're going to gain points based on different flags, and then multiply that by the milestones reached on the global market track. All right, so for me, these 2 are the same. So they only count as 1 flag. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 different flags. And the highest milestone I reached is 7. So 7 times 7 is 49 points. All right, as for the bot, So the bot has 7 total different flags. Now the bot did not reach 7. The highest milestone is 6. So that'll be a total of 42 points. I did want to mention a mistake I made earlier in the video, and that is that when we are distributing the special flags, while they may be mandatory to take, you also should lose influence points from the last symbol on the track. That means that if I was over here, let's say I was here at 13, I would have had to gone back all the way to 10. Same thing here. If I took another flag, or the bot took another flag, in this case we'll use the bot's marker, it would go from this space all the way back to this space. Alright, but that's the end of my presentation. I hope this tutorial has been helpful. I sure had a blast playing it and recording it. So until our next board game adventure, hope you had a great time with this one.